Good morning and welcome to Creating a Supportive Environment for the Social Enterprise webinar. Just to give you a bit of background on us, we are consultants with the Southeast Business Innovation Centre, which was established in 1995 and is this year celebrating 25 years supporting businesses in the Southeast region, which is some achievement, I think. I would like to introduce my colleague Michelle O'Rourke, who is the project manager for SuNSE and is our moderator this morning. Questions can be asked via the question link and will be answered at the end. Just to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be available online at a later stage. If there is anything you would like to discuss in private, please feel free to contact us directly. Contact information will be available at the end of the webinar. We are very fortunate today to have experts who have first-hand experience of developing and growing successful enterprises in Ireland. Throughout this webinar, we will discuss the important role that social enterprise has in Ireland and in Irish society, and ways to grow and start a sustainable business. Our guest speakers are Tammy Darcy, John Avoy, and Senan Cook, and we are delighted to welcome them. We would also like to say a big thank you to everyone here for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. Before we hand over to our first speaker, I would like to take a few minutes to give a brief overview of the SuNSE project and our role in supporting emerging and existing social enterprises in our region. So, creating a supportive environment for social enterprises has come out of an Interreg project, which is Northwest Europe. The aim of the project is to support social enterprises across the southern half of Ireland. The SuNSE project offers a tailored support service which includes one-to-one mentoring and advice, business development support, workshops and webinars that help build and grow sustainable enterprises. The duration of the entire project is 50 months and there are 9 partners based across Europe, and the project is funded by the ERDF, the European Regional Development Fund. This is our favourite description of a social entrepreneur. I'm sure everyone has their own, but we think that this is a good one. So, what do we offer? We offer a range of free of charge services, including consultations, but due to COVID restrictions currently, all of our services are online. We have an office space, a hub office in our incubation centre as well, which is free of charge. And obviously at the moment that again is not available. But if you are interested, please contact us to express your interest and we will let you know when it's reopened. We use a number of tools, including the business model canvas, which has been adapted for social enterprise, and we do business plan development and goal setting as well. We also have our online portal, which is a very interesting and informative portal. Basically what it is, it's at sunse.eu, and there are short information videos. So when you go on, it looks like the London Underground map. And you can click on any of the points. So if you're looking, say, for marketing, help with marketing, you click on the marketing icon, and then it will take you into a selection of how-to videos. It's still in being developed at the moment, but you can go and visit it, and there are live, there is content on it that you can actually work with. This is the social enterprise model canvas tool that we use to assist clients developing the building blocks for their enterprise. We work through each segment to build a visual and sort of very concise description of their business, which they can then use to develop out their business plan. In terms of, we obviously offer support and advice, but we also receive support and advice from our project working group. And I'd like to give a shout out to the members of that group, which is Liz Riches, Angela Campion, Paddy Casey, Anne Nolan, and Nicola Tull, to whom we'd like to extend a big thank you because they've been a great source of advice and help to us. In terms of our success stories, won't go into any detail about them, but we have worked with Muckalee, and that was they wanted funding for a community shop. So we worked on a business model canvas with them, and we worked on a business plan, and they were successful in securing funding. Your Health Psychology is Orna Murray, and she's working with women to try and encourage them to stay in sport. The Renew Enterprises we worked with on a business model canvas again, and a diagnostic. And Waterford Integration Services and Nolan we worked with again on developing business model canvas and a business plan for her to help her to develop her business. And that's all. That's just a very brief and concise overview of the project. And I'll now hand over to Michelle.
So good morning, everybody, and thank you very much, Carol, for that. And I'd just like to welcome everybody here this morning. And just before I introduce our first speaker, I'd like just to remind everybody that you're very welcome to put forward any questions in advance of the Q&A session at the end. So I am delighted now to introduce and welcome John Avoy. John is our first speaker this morning. And John recently joined Grow Remote as General Manager following 3 years as the Social Enterprise Development Fund Manager at Rethink Ireland, where he managed a wide portfolio of social impact investments. He is also the founder of the Irish Men's Sheds Association, which has grown extensively over the past 5 years. So John, if you would like to have your camera turned on and unmuted there. So yeah, please work away there. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Okay, thanks a million, Michelle and Carol, for the introductions, and thanks for the invitation to be part of this important webinar this morning. It's always nice to be asked to be involved in these things, and I find that they're really important as well, because you know, there's such it's really quite a small space in Ireland, and sometimes the information isn't out there, and while between us all we've got great knowledge, but we need to make every effort to share it. Like you said, I suppose I've got kind of various backgrounds, both as you know, working in a social enterprise or as a social entrepreneur, or at the other side of the table in terms of being a funder. And yeah, and so that's been an interesting journey. And when I took up the role with Rethink Ireland, or previously the Social Innovation Fund, you know, it was just an opportunity I couldn't turn down. This is about just over 3 years ago, because you know, I just always remember that when I was in the early stages of setting up like the Men's Sheds Association, that there was loads of people out there who helped me and helped me for free, and having funders come on board in the early days of that was like, it was more than about the money. It was about people believing in your mission, and I think that's really important. So when I had the opportunity to do the same for others, I couldn't turn it down. So for a while I kind of described myself as a poacher turned gamekeeper, but then even more recently I've gone back to being a poacher again, and I'm really lucky to have started a new role back more as in an entrepreneurial space, and joined a social enterprise startup called Grow Remote, and people are very we're very open to sharing all about that if people want, but that's not what you have me here for today. It's really to talk a little bit about my time as a funder and some of the tips I could give people if they're looking for funding. So I was thinking a little bit about this, and basically, like, there's usually, it'll fall into one or two categories. There's the conversational piece, you know, where you're developing relationships maybe with high net worth individuals, or with companies, or with corporates, where you end up like managing a relationship and then try and pitching for some funding. And it's really quite difficult because it's not a mapped out process. And then there's also the other one where I have more experience in, where there's funding applications, you know, for specific amounts of funding that open at a specific time through a trust foundation or through the government. And again, it's not easy to get the money, but at least you kind of know the ground rules are a little more laid out when it's like an open application process with a deadline and the criteria and stuff like that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about both of those. So first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about the pitching piece, and like, if you're going to trying to develop a relationship with a potential funder over a period of time, and and you know, how do you ask, when do you ask, and stuff like that. So I suppose, you know, it always depends on like your relationship with the funder. Like, so it's very difficult to start from scratch. If you identify a company in your locality and you go, I'd love to get money off them, like, you can be assured that there's loads of other social enterprises or charities saying the same, thinking the same thing. So you have to make sure that you're different and have a really clear rationale. So I suppose it's just then trying to not cold call. You need to have a relationship. Somebody knows somebody, like an email or something from, or a phone call from somebody that a CEO of a company or a high net worth individual has never met before is very unlikely to gain traction. So an introduction or knowing somebody in the company or something is a much better way in. So I think what you need to do, yeah, like get those few minutes in front of the person you're talking to. And if you do, you've often heard people talking about an elevator pitch, but basically it's when you have only a really short time to make an impression. So when you have that time, I think you just need to, like, I think the research shows that people have the first 8 to 10 seconds to keep people interested in the rest of what's going to be said. So it's really like been, you know, getting your most attention hooking statement out of your mouth first. And I know it can be a bit weird, but I think that really works, because after that, if the person remains interested in what you're saying, you'll have time to tell them who you are and how you're different and what you do, you know, and that type of thing. You know, there's different schools of thought out there in the funding space about when you should ask. Some people said you should always ask straight away, and others think you should take your time and develop the relationship and like come to a natural conclusion about when is the right time to ask. So I think there's no hard and fast answer for that. I think that it's, you know, you have to use your gut and you have to use your experience. One thing we do kind of know, it depends on who you're talking to. Like typically in Ireland or in England, UK, if you're developing a relationship with somebody, for example, a CEO of a company, like, they're very smart people and they know what it's about. So you don't have to wait loads and loads and have loads of meetings. You know, it's after 1 or 2 meetings, you get to say what you're talking about. Then the challenge is, like, how much do you ask for? My suggestion is to kind of have a couple of options. Start big and kind of get a sense of how that's landing, and then have a lower option if that doesn't seem to be landing well. So, for example, if you've been, if you're a relatively small social enterprise, we'll say in Waterville, and you've been developing a relationship with one of the pharmaceutical companies, I'd suggest that, like, if you're in front of their CEO, you're asking for 50,000 or something like that, and you're gauging the response. Anything over 50,000 is considered a very big gift in Ireland, and they're quite unusual. And 50,000 is still a lot of money. And it's not that likely that you'll get a yes from that straight away, but I think that's a typical range to be landing it in. It's like, it could be, you need to have it attached to a specific outcome. For 1 year, and you have a plan how that business development person is then going to make your business sustainable going forward, and how this money is going to be the catalyst for future sustainability and future social impact. But in that discussion, you might notice that 50,000 isn't landing anywhere. You to have a second option that, like, might be much smaller, say 5 or 10,000. But if you're not, you know, if that doesn't suit your budget right now, you might like to sponsor an upcoming event which would come in at, and say your number. One of the things, like, and I've learned this completely off a colleague of mine in Rethink called Pádraig, who was our business development manager, always get something leaving the meeting. So even at the end of that meeting, and they're saying no to the lower amount of money, you could say, you know, reframe and go, I really appreciate your time and the energy you've put into this. I know you mightn't have the budget right now, so maybe could you like introduce me to 1 or 2 people in your network who I might be able to have similar conversations with, or something along those lines, so that no meeting is a wasted meeting. And that does tend to lead to success. And another like kind of frame of mind, if you can maintain the attitude that no doesn't mean no, but no just means not yet or not right now, that can be very useful. So if you feel it's appropriate at the end of those conversations, maybe to ask a couple of open-ended questions to the potential funder about, like, so what was it that like made you think we weren't a suitable investment right now? Or like, you know, was it the time? And so ask a couple of open-ended questions that you might find out a little bit more that you can use into a future pitch, but also might open the door a little bit again for a conversation in the future. Kind of, is it okay if I come back to you, you know, at the start of next year when a new budget is in place, and things like that. So it's keeping doors open. You hear that some relationships take long time to cultivate, maybe 2 to 3 years, and others can come to fruition quite quickly. Yeah, they're just some of my tips. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm just going to speak a little bit about the other side of things when you're writing funding applications. And so this is a little bit more straightforward. Not to say that it's more likely that you'll get funding, because funding applications in Ireland are usually very, very competitive. Most funders have a limited amount that they can give out, and they'll be hugely oversubscribed. Typically in my time with the Social Innovation Fund, the fund I was managing, the Social Enterprise Development Fund, we were getting in the region of 200 applications, and we would fund between like 10 and 20. So less than 10% of a success rate, which is, you know, quite low. So yeah, always have to, I suppose, at the start of the process, like, I mean, read the criteria really clearly. And I think it's worth taking a little bit of time and maybe discussing it with somebody. You know, you have a really good chance of winning, because if you objectively don't really have a chance of winning the grant, like, is it the best use of your time and energy? And that's only something you can answer yourself. So, and because we often find that people have applied that it didn't even fit the core criteria, you know. And for example, at the fund I was managing, you have to be a non-profit, like, so a for-profit business who had a social mission and might be doing amazing work, company limited by shares, for example, just weren't eligible because of our funding arrangement with the government. And but we still probably got 10 applications from people who were company limited by shares every year, and they were immediately not eligible, and that was just a waste of their time and energy. Some basic tips, I suppose, for writing applications is, like, when a fund is advertised, there'll always be a deadline, so start it early. Don't leave it to be a last minute job. Don't leave it to the last few days. You know, probably read the criteria as early as possible and suss out if they need additional documentation, maybe tax clearance, maybe, you know, a signed document from the directors, for example. They could be some of the things that different organizations look for. And you don't want to find that you've left doing the application till the last day and you don't have those things, and then you end up not having them.
Perfect, thank you.
No problem. Sorry, is that time?
It is indeed. Thank you very much, John, for that.
Okay, no bother. I didn't see. Yeah, perfect. I have a few more, but I can answer questions later.
Yeah, because actually I have some questions for you later on, after the rest of the panelists have spoken. And actually you answered some of the question there just a moment ago, because one of the particular questions was, what is the most common oversight that enterprises make when completing an application form for funding or for grants? Yeah,
so I would say it's similar to what I said. It's like not matching their answer to the questions. That yes. Funders have funders too, and they need to meet their own criteria. So they've got very specific things they're looking for. And like, it's just make sure you answer the questions and that you're suitable.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, John. That was very informative. And we will appreciate your valuable contribution to us this morning.
Thank you.
So if you want to, so I'm just going to introduce Senan. So it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Senan Cook. And Senan is a social enterprise activist, innovator, and author. He has been involved in the setting up of 7 social enterprises and is currently acting secretary and board member of 5 social enterprises. He wrote The Enterprise and Community in 2018, which is recognised as the most relevant reference book on social enterprise development in Ireland. So welcome to you, Senan. And Senan, if you want to start your video there and unmute.
Start video, okay.
Perfect, okay. And if you want to go into your, share your screen there and go into slide share.
Okay. Hello to everyone. I'm just delighted to be part of this. I do agree totally with John in relation to that those who have information and have experience should share it with each other and with everyone else who's trying to set up social enterprises, consolidate social enterprises, or expand social enterprises. So, and I'm really just talking, I have 3 slides, and the first one is on providing a positive environment in which social enterprise can work. And most of us, we all know really that social enterprise is emerging kind of from the shadows, like, you know what I mean, and trying to establish itself as a serious socio-economic player in society and in the economy in general, like, you know what I mean. It's a serious economic sector, you know, when it will be understood by everyone, like, you know what I mean. So the first thing I think to create a positive environment would be to define the social enterprise sector so that it is known and its potential is understood. Like, that's absolutely crucial. And I think the social enterprise sector is an enormous sector. It's a multi-billion sector, I think, when it's really understood and known, you know, and there's work going on that at the moment. And it also requires the Department of Rural and Community Development to work with the Department for Enterprise and Innovation above any others now, to work with every other department, but in particular to work with the Department of Enterprise and Innovation, so to cover the social and the enterprise side of social enterprise. It is a type of oxymoron, and they seem to be in a way contradictory, given the economy, given society, given the way we talk, given the words we use. You know, they don't go easily together. Like, you know, one is kind of interferes with the other in the minds of a lot of people. But in effect, really, that's not the case, and it shouldn't be the case. And they can work together, and they can complement each other. And actually, enterprise is really, without enterprise, without entrepreneurship, it's very difficult to see social improvement, like, you know what I mean. And without good social interaction and all that, and you know, you're not going to, I'm talking about collaboration, I'm talking about integration and all that. You're not really going to have get the very best from enterprise. So what's needed is to complete research on the challenges that are facing social enterprise and voluntary directors. We really need to understand, we need to gather the facts, we need to understand what the situation is, and we need to list them, and we need to see them for what they are, like, you know what I mean, and see what the challenges are, and see how voluntary directors are working in a kind of a chaotic environment at the minute, like, you know what I mean, with so much difficulty and challenges being faced. We need to identify areas of opportunity, possibility, promise, and improvement. We need to identify the barriers, the obstacles, and develop solutions for them. And I think that if we do that, if we really go into that, I'm talking about all of us working together. I'm talking about the department, the agencies, you know, the universities, you know, communities, you know, everyone working together. I think that there is a lot of potential there, and a lot of opportunity there, and a lot of solutions there to be implemented. And this is a time above any other time in the history of the country, with COVID-19 and with Brexit on the horizon. Well, we need to get together. We need to work together. We need to listen to each other, and we need to act. You know. So another issue is to list all the supports available across the whole of government, and to categorise them and explain them. So that then they become supports. They're not supports if they're not known, if they're not categorized, if they're not listed, if they're not explained, if they're not communicated, if samples and if case studies are not provided as to how best to use them. Then we should list all the resources available in the community, both the live resources, which are a lot of it are volunteers, and a lot of materials and equipment and all that. But then there's a whole range of dormant resources available that need to be, like dormant buildings, like like closed down post offices, like a whole closed down Garda barracks. You know, I'm just talking about on the building side. Of course, there's a huge amount of volunteers that would be attracted to working in the community with social enterprise if they could see, if they saw they weren't being laden down with a lot of governance, overladen with governance and things that they're not happy to get involved with. Then the next point is to train agency staff to work in partnership with project leaders and teams. So we need to train agency staff to work in partnership with them, not agency staff that runs programs, that manages programs, that puts forward criteria for the person on the ground to meet with. You know, no, that's not the way we want it. We need them to be there to work with and to explain and to help the people on the ground, you know, to achieve the funding they require, to achieve the supports they require. We need them to produce annual reports to a central source, highlighting the commercial and the social impacts. Without social enterprise being able to show to the world at large the commercial and social impacts that they're achieving, we're not going to really make the way we should. And in doing that, we should provide a central IT shared learning platform and have that platform in a way that we can all contribute to that platform. But then when we want it, we can take from the platform what we want from the platform. So I just give a simple, on the second slide, simple thing on Dunhill Copper Coast. And we have within the Copper Coast, there's 7 villages in the Copper Coast, but we have 25 social enterprise, very active social and very different social enterprise, covering enterprise, covering education, covering the environment, covering social, covering tourism. There's a mix, a brilliant mix of them there. And some of the, when DFBA, which was party to setting up the Copper Coast, when it set up in the late 1990s and then the early 21st century, we've increased our population from 1,500 to 2,400. We've massively increased our educational provision, both in the national schools, but also in the education centre that we have in the enterprise centre. We have developed an eco-park enterprise centre with 31 enterprises and 70 jobs. And since we started up, we've created 250 jobs, but some of those businesses have moved on, they've expanded, they've relocated, but they're still there and they've grown and they're very successful. We also have 26 integrated constructed wetlands and Fenner Bog, which is now a best practice area for the country and for internationally. And then we also achieved a Copper Coast Global Geopark status and accredited with the EU and with UNESCO as a global geopark, which is an extraordinary thing because it's the only geopark in the world that is run on a voluntary basis by 7 villages in an area in the south of Waterford. And of course, we have the 25 social enterprises across the villages geopark. And the final slide then, I'm saying that these, if we really want to get the best out of what we have, the resources we have, the commitment we have, the interest we have, we have from communities and from the people living in communities. And there was never a time that community was more important. It's next to family in being important in relation to the challenges that are confronting the country and confronting communities. So the urgent changes required would be that we need a different legal unit for social enterprise other than what we have at the moment. And we need to reduce the complexity of governance. So we need a new legal form. We need, where we can, full-time managers who will get much more from volunteers, and will get much more volunteers involved if they know that there's somebody there who is full-time. And I'm saying that full-time managers should be granted on the basis of a business plan, a 3-year business plan, which shows that within the 3 years that the manager will be paid for by the social enterprise. And that manager can manage 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 social enterprises, or one, whichever is right, to develop the plan which will produce the funding to pay for the manager then in year 4, 5 and 6. I'm just saying that every proposal should be accepted for examination, because whenever there's a proposal available, that's the right time for the proposer. But when we go to the agencies, we see that, well, no, that development you're proposing, that's not on our agenda at this point in time. And you'll have to wait until the next round of European funding before that may be on the agenda or not. And that's a tragedy in a way, because some of the most brilliant proposals have been turned down because they don't fit the criteria that's being worked on by the thing. And so therefore I'm saying that that like if I'm a private business, I should be the same with a social enterprise. Whatever idea I have at the time I have it, I should be able to put it, and I should be able to get support for it. I think that grants should be 90-10 for startups and for those projects that have employment involved in it. And the Department of Enterprise and Employment have said that for every person that's taken off their unemployment register, there's a saving of 21,000 per year for that person, for the government. So therefore, I'm saying it's obvious, like, you know, that they can give much better grants for startups and employment projects. And I said, you can leave the 75-25 for all others. I think there should be special funding for pilot projects that can be replicated. Where I put forward a project that I know, if it's successful, can be replicated around the country, well, then there should be a special funding for that. Because my project, if it's successful, is just one, but maybe 10 more can be replicated around the country. And I think that there should the last point I'm making is that there should be special funding for collaborations, partnerships, and for where problems are solved. If I come forward with a proposal to solve a problem in a community, of course, that can be replicated around other communities, well, then there should be special attention and special funding provided for me. And I shouldn't be turned down under any circumstances. You know what I mean? So look, I know I've run through that. Like, look, that's the point I'm making in general. And I think there's work going on in relation to how the social enterprise sector can be organised and how these things can be maybe in the future tackled and opened up to everyone.
And thank you very much for that, Sen. And I actually agree, there's a lot more discussion happening now, especially since the emergence of COVID-19 and people responding to you know, the need for a social impact in our communities, both locally, you know, in our regions, and nationally, of course. And you know, in your book, Sen, in the enterprise community, you give a lot of advice to enterprise leaders and managers. And what is the one piece of advice that you could share with us today for leaders and managers facing the challenges into next year?
You know, I suppose I think there was never more opportunities than there is now. I think that the crisis is creating opportunities, and I just think that managers, I think it goes back to what John said, of course, as well. I think you need to build relationships with the agencies. You need to build relationships, obviously, with people in your community and that, like, you know, with the volunteers and that, like, you know. So I just think that what managers should do is just see in the new situation, in the new normal, you know, what is there for them, like, and maybe they will have to adapt. Maybe they will have to maybe redefine their own mission. You know what I mean, to be more relevant in the new normal, like, you know. So it's the time for reflection.
Yes.
And for reconsidering, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And building relationships.
Thank you very much for that, then, and thank you so much. We really appreciate your contribution this morning, and we look forward to the conversation and the questions at the end after our next speaker. So if you want to switch off your video and unmute there, Sen, and thank you so much for that. And I'd like to swiftly move over to our next speaker, and I have the great pleasure of introducing Tammy Darcy, who is the founder and CEO of the Shona Project, a multi-award winning social enterprise, which aims to educate, empower and inspire today's Irish girls to become tomorrow's confident young women. Tammy is also the interim CEO of Syria, a new representative body for social enterprise in Ireland. Tammy also sits on the implementation group for the National Social Enterprise Strategy and is the chair of the awareness group. So thank you very much for joining us this morning, Tammy.
Hello, how are you?
Very good indeed.
Good.
I
didn't bring, or I didn't do any slides.
Perfect, no worries.
Yeah, sometimes I find them quite distracting actually in Zoom calls, so I'm just going to talk, if that's okay, just for a few
Perfect.
minutes.
We'll leave you to it there. Thank you very much for that.
So look, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to speak alongside two of my colleagues in the social enterprise space, both of whom, Senan and John, have been a massive support to me and indeed to the entire social enterprise sector in Ireland. Thanks also to Carol and the team at SuNSE for inviting me to talk this morning. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Tammy Darcy. I'm the founder and CEO of the Shona Project, which Michelle has already explained to you. Since July, I've also become the interim CEO of SARI, which is a new national representative body for social enterprise in Ireland. So I'm lucky enough to work on two of my passions, which are positive outcomes for the young women of Ireland and the development of social enterprise, which is a growing sector which I believe is undervalued and under-recognised for its contribution to society and to the economy here in Ireland. SARI is practitioner-led, has majority practitioner representation on its board, and has just created a practitioner council to guide its future objectives and activities. So, you know, for those of you that are running social enterprises or interested in social enterprises and haven't already joined, you can do so today for free, either as a practitioner or as a supporter. But I think my experience in founding and scaling the Shona Project and now working to keep it going during this horrendous time gives me an insight into the reality, what the reality is for social enterprises and how we can be better supported. And that's what I've been asked to talk about today. So Carol has asked me to share the story of the Shona Project, the highs and the lows, and I guess with that in mind, if I might as well just start at the very beginning. So I was in my early 30s working in a lovely, secure, flexible job that I absolutely loved, surrounded and working with people that I really enjoyed spending my days with. And I was also giving my own time to my community on a small scale. So I was chair of our local soccer club, Park Rangers, out in Faithleg, which is one of the first clubs in the country to create an initiative called Soccer for All, which gives kids with physical and intellectual disabilities the opportunity to play sport. And I thought that's how impact was created. You work in a job to pay your bills, and then you give your extra time as a volunteer where you can. And that the two never really meet. You're either social or you're an enterprise, but you know, you can't be both. And I was also studying for a master's in business, which included a series of seminars bringing in entrepreneurs and business leaders to talk about their successes. And one of those speakers was Michael Kelly from GIY, who told his now infamous garlic story. If you haven't heard it, you know, I think me and John could recite it back to you if you need to at this stage. And I was absolutely gobsmacked to hear that this amazing business model that would allow you to start a business that's main objective was the creation of social impact and that you could make it your job. And it was on that very day that this passion project that I'd stored away in the back of my mind started to gather steam. I started to write down notes and ideas in a little notebook, and then I kept that notebook to myself for 3 years before showing it to anybody else. And this incidentally brings me to my very first point regarding social enterprise and how we can support its growth in Ireland. I believe that education is a key driver in raising awareness in those who are still trying to figure out what their passion is. And anyone who's ever listened to me speak before has probably heard me say this a few times, but social enterprise can't continue to live in a bubble. It needs to be further integrated, I believe, into the wider business community and recognised as a sustainable and legitimate way of doing business. But anyway, back to the story of Shona. So I started at my kitchen table on a Friday night in October 2016, started a WordPress account and a Facebook page and announced the arrival of the Shona Project to the world. And I was terrified because I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I was really clear on the impact that it was that I wanted to create, but I didn't have any idea on how I was going to get there. I struggled a lot with imposter syndrome, and I also struggled with the fact that the inspiration behind the Shona Project was so deeply personal to me, and it would mean sharing my story and my sister Shona's story and my family's story over and over again. So it was more than just a business for me. It was deeply, deeply personal, which, you know, obviously led to my fears around, you know, if it failed, what did that mean for me? So my first point of call at the time was Liz Rich's in Waterford Area Partnership. And even though I had studied a master's in business management and I had all the theory down, the actual day-to-day stuff really confused me. Like, where do I have to go to register a business? What type of business can it be? Where will I get startup money? And I can honestly say now, if it wasn't for Liz Rich's, the Shona project probably wouldn't be here, because at the time I really needed somebody to see the value in my idea and to be able to look into the future and see the potential that the Shona project had. And if her reaction had been anything other than positive, I would have convinced myself it was a bad idea, and I probably would have walked away, and that would have been it. And now, like 4 years later, we've created more impact than I ever thought was possible at that time. We've worked with over 13,000 girls in schools. We've reached over 300,000 online. We've delivered workshops on 3 continents. We've won awards and delivered sold out conferences. And we've had loads of lovely random things happen, like being part of an RTE TV show, meeting the Princes of England, having our faces projected 20 feet high on the GPO in O'Connell Street in Dublin beside Countess Markievicz and Katie Taylor for Nollaig na Man. And some people might call this a success story, but yeah, like we're still here in the middle of a pandemic stressing about our income and how many more months we can survive and how we can pivot and bring in new innovation to keep going, just like any other business has. And especially now with the mental health ramifications of this pandemic for the teenage girls that we work with, you know, which are striking and actually quite scary. So it's not an easy time to, you know, it's a time when you'd be expected to ramp up your efforts as opposed to scale back. So our future's uncertain, just like anybody else's, and our entire team, including myself and all of our volunteers, are pulling out all the stops to try and innovate and pivot and survive. So I've got 7 points on my thoughts as a social enterprise practitioner based on my experience on how we can provide a supportive environment for social enterprises. And I'm not saying that none of these supports exist. Some do, some could be done more, some are doing just fine, but should be protected and recognised. And until we can clone Liz Riches and Senan Cook and Johnny Evoy and Carol and the SuNSE team and all the others who are working so hard for the rest of us to succeed. So these are just some suggestions. So number 1, and I'm really surprised Senan didn't mention this, but I think the first thing we need to do is measure what we have. So there's no data available in Ireland summing up exactly how many social enterprises we have, who we are, who our customers are, who we sell to. And there are many companies calling themselves social enterprise because their work provides some level of social impact, but that doesn't reflect the national definition, and there's no certification or, you know, stamp that we can put on ourselves to declare the fact that we are a legitimate social enterprise. And until we have those numbers, like, we're just like fairies or unicorns, we're hypothetical, and we've no way of firmly and proudly celebrating our impact to either society or to the economy. I think we really need to know who we are and to have ownership of our own sector, the sector that we're building ourselves. The second one is to have more focus on the enterprise part of social enterprise. So when I first started, there wasn't really supports available through the local enterprise board. And this told me 2 things. Number 1, that social enterprises weren't valued as legitimate businesses with potential to create jobs, and that there wasn't going to be any support through that channel for me. And number 2, that social enterprises might be seen as like a nice fluffy little project by both government and policymakers and the wider community. And things are definitely starting to change, and I really welcome that change. But social enterprises and traditional enterprises both operate to generate profit and have the opportunity to scale and create jobs. The only difference is what we do with that profit. And I think we need to be thinking way bigger about the potential that we have. Others take the lead from government on how they view us, and I think we need to be taken more seriously because we are deadly serious about our businesses. The third point is about more access to training and practical supports. And at the Shona project, we've been really, really lucky. So 6 months after we launched, we won Social Entrepreneurs Ireland funding. And for the past 2 years, we've won what's now called Rethink Ireland funding. And this has provided us with really vital funding to get on our feet, but it's also meant that we've been almost constantly on some sort of accelerator program and had access to mentors and training opportunities and events that has been priceless for us. But I'm really conscious that those supports aren't available to everybody. And I really try to pass on as much as I learn to others whenever I can, but none of us know it all when we're starting out. And I believe that that level of expertise should be available to as many as possible, to those who aren't quite ready for or who haven't been accepted on these programs, because these organizations, Rethink and SCI and other funders, they can't help everybody. And I think otherwise we create a gap in the sector which makes it easier for some to succeed than others. And I think we all need a champion and somewhere to go when we have a question. My fourth point is about peer networks, and the most special part of the social enterprise sector is the goodwill, the authenticity, the genuine friendships that exist within it. I'm part of a group of about 5 female social entrepreneurs, and we met on one of those other programs that I just mentioned, which was aimed at public speaking and pitching, but we now meet online for breakfast on the first Tuesday of every month, including the facilitator of those sessions, who's a social entrepreneur herself. And when I see those appointments in my calendar and I know they're coming up, I know I leave them feeling energized and refreshed and inspired, because it's somewhere safe where we can go. Everything comes out in the wash. We can have freakouts or meltdowns, but we also celebrate our achievements when we do well. And I'm part of lots of little networks like that, and they're so precious to me. So I'd love to see that being encouraged more. I think we do it well here in Waterford, but outside of that, maybe, you know, we need to not underestimate the importance of peer networking and peer. I'll get through the next 3 as fast as I can. So the number 5 is space to innovate and make mistakes. I heard Dan Pallotta speak in the Mansion House in Dublin a few years ago, and he really transformed how I thought about investment in social enterprises and how the restraints we contend with can often undermine our potential. So funders want to see us invest in impact and often don't want to fund overhead. And other businesses have the opportunity to pilot and develop new products and services, and they have space and autonomy to make mistakes. And as social enterprises, we're expected to get it right first time, and I think that stifles us in terms of our innovation. Just to give you like a really simple example of that, if I was to set up a social enterprise that was focused on feeding stray dogs, and I got through traded income or through fundraising or grant aid or however, income of €100, I feel like we're expected to spend that straight on feeding those dogs and buying dog food. But if we're given space and support required to invest that money in R&D or marketing strategies or new product development, we could come up with better business models, like maybe producing top quality artisan dog food to families who own dogs and can afford it, and then those funds being able to offer low cost or free food for the dogs that we're trying to save. So it's a very crude example, but in the second scenario, we grow our impact way beyond the potential of the first scenario, and we also become more sustainable in the long run. We also need to pay people properly so that we can recruit and retain top talent and prevent burnout that I see so often in this sector. Number 6, recognise the power of storytelling. So our stories are what set us apart from any other sector in Ireland. Social entrepreneurs are diverse, they're authentic, they're unique, they're fascinating, and I've never met a social entrepreneur that I didn't want to listen to. So telling our stories and celebrating our achievements is vital to spreading awareness of social enterprise, which would benefit all of us. I think we all have nuggets of examples of the impact that we create and the lives that we change. And I'd like to see more opportunities for those stories to be shared, integrating them into traditional business platforms or mainstream business education platforms. And if you look at the impact that Mick Kelly and that garlic story that I'd imagine he's so sick of telling at this stage had on me, and the impact that now we've had on hundreds of thousands of others as a result of hearing that story, which might not have happened if either he or I hadn't been in that room on that day. Finally, my final point, and then I'll wrap it up. I think it's really important that we have representation, and this is something that I've felt passionate about for a long time. I sit on the National Implementation Committee for Social Enterprise, and I believe that more practitioner voices need to be involved in the decisions that affect us all. And I believe that so much that when I was asked to join SERI, I took it on, even though I had more than enough to keep me busy. And I think this is the start of an amazing time for social enterprise. And if we get the support that we need, we could genuinely be one of the countries that other territories look at as best in class. So, you know, I'm really proud of what we're achieving together and really excited about what's yet to come for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tammy, and we're looking forward to seeing what happens next for you as well. And I'd just like to read out an observation that came into us here, and this lady is saying, I absolutely agree, Tammy, still a lot of challenges for social entrepreneurs to access the same level of supports. as traditional entrepreneurs, including the BTWEA and the STEA. So thank you very much for that. And what I'll do next there is to welcome Senan back and John, so that we can open the floor there for you, so for some question and answers here that have come in here. So they've been kind of coming in thick and fast here. So if you don't mind, I'm going to put you on and I'll just start with the first one here. So what is the most flexible setup structure for a social enterprise? So this person is saying in England it is possible to establish a CIC rather than a not-for-profit. Is there a similar arrangement available in Ireland?
So the other panelists might be able to answer this as well as I can. Thanks
Yes.
for the question. So no, as far as I understand, like in Ireland, like, I mean, there's basically two types of companies, like in mainstream, unless you go down in corporates and stuff, companies limited by shares or companies limited by guarantee. And one basically considered for profit or not profit, and the rest of the stuff, and it, you know, it's just window dressing really in Ireland, to be honest, in my opinion. But I know there's some interest in reviewing this from the Department of Rural Community Development, and it's, I think, one of the measures in their policy is to do a piece of work to see if this needs to be reviewed and changed, because there are other options in other countries. So that's the short answer, really.
Okay. Anybody else there for that one? Okay. And another question here, it says, hi John, at what stage during the startup process did you get your first yes for refunding, and was it the turning point?
So yeah, so yes, it was the turning point for sure. And that's really interesting, because like years later, this American camera crew came over to do a documentary, and it was called Turning Point, and it was and that was like, I really thought that was the thing. We're getting that first. We got 25,000 from the Arthur Guinness Fund in 2011. The Arthur Guinness Fund is no more, unfortunately. It was a fund for social entrepreneurs that was run for a couple of years. Yeah, so I suppose I had been working full time with WWETB, like while I was setting up Men's Sheds, the Men's Sheds Association, for the couple of years prior to that. And I suppose really grateful to them to kind of facilitate that as well, like, because they gave me a lot of support and you know, and some resources. So it was, yeah, that was the turning point. Getting that money kind of allowed me to yeah, just allowed me to take the plunge and give up my day job and start, you know, and do this as a job. But it was amazing, and kind of like looking back, it was the right thing to do, was to progress as far as I could while doing another job. Like if I had been tempted to leave my full-time job earlier, and I'm glad I didn't, you know, so yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that, John. I have a question, maybe perhaps more for you, Tammy, here, because you mentioned it in your discussion about education. And the question here is, WIT have a cert in social enterprise management in progress. And so is there a need for a degree, you know, to go into management? What would you encourage and support this person to do?
That's hard to answer without knowing the person. That certain social enterprise is a really good program.
Yes.
I was involved in conversations about it before.
Yes.
It was actually in the Department of Education that I worked in before I came to do this job, and it's a really my understanding of it is that it's a really practical, it gives really practical information and tools, and might maybe even give access to networks, which I think is really important. When I started the SuNSE project, I felt like I had to have all the degrees done before I'd be ready to go, you know, that I needed to know everything about marketing and financial management and, you know, mental health and education. And it held me back for quite a while. Now I really believe that you don't need to know all of the things, but you need to maybe surround yourself with good people who can answer those questions for you. So that's where your board and your other support network comes in. So I don't necessarily think you need to have a degree. I think have a look at that program. If you think it'll give you some confidence and even an overview, how long would it take you to do a degree? And then also look at smaller, little more practical courses that you can do, or opportunities to come up that really fill the gaps for you. But I would definitely recommend that program. I think it's the right amount of time just to get your feet into it and to give you a really good overview, and then decide yourself, you know, what you need after that.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. The next question that I have here is, I'm just going to read it straight. When I was setting up my business recently, I thought about making a social enterprise, but was advised against it. So she's saying, you know, how would she deal with this? What does she need to do? Where can she access support about the most appropriate business model for her?
Yeah, well, I hop in there ahead of the other panelists. So yeah, a couple of, I suppose it's kind of like who you end up talking to in these things when you're seeking advice, because different people will give different advice. Yeah. But I do think that, like, there is a growing understanding of what social enterprises are and how they can, like, fulfill any business or social missions potential, just as well as a for-profit business. You know, if that was bespoke advice, I suppose again we need to know the nature of the business. But typically in the past, you know, a lot of people like working in, you know, established for-profit business kind of support structures didn't know so much about social enterprises or how they work, or, you know, or maybe the communication from their funders wasn't clear that they could support them. So I think that's changing. But there still are situations where maybe somebody are right to set up a company limited by shares as opposed to a company limited by guarantee. We'd have to know the details. Okay.
Thank you very much for that, John. I have an observation here, a question for Tammy again. So thank you, Tammy. A national stamp for a social enterprise would inspire us to obtain such a stamp. How easy and whom do you think would be in position to implement it?
I was actually just typing a response there to that. So at SERI, we've just gotten started. We only launched in just July, just gone, and we're putting structures in place to be able to represent the sector. And that's one of the key things that we've been looking at, is what we've created relationships with Social Enterprise UK, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales about how they do it in their countries and how we can apply it here. So that's going to be one of our priorities, but it will have to be something that the entire sector believes in and stands behind. So we're looking at how we can work with all the stakeholders to make that happen. So I just would say stay tuned on that.
Okay. And sorry, just a question there that I have for Senan.
I've been asked a question now. Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, Senan, I beg your pardon. So, yeah, Senan, a report published in the last 5 years revealed that the Irish social enterprise sector had the potential to generate about 40,000 new jobs and add about 2 billion to GDPR if the right conditions were provided by government. Do you think that this is achievable?
I do. I do think it now more than ever. I think, like, you know, I just think that there's so many issues that need to be addressed, in particular in communities, you know, and there's so many opportunities and there's so many resources. There's an abundance of resources that can be used by social enterprises, you know. And when I talk about that, I think that most county councils, city councils, government agencies, if a social enterprise or a social entrepreneur can organize a team to address an issue or to address a dormant resource or to, you know, address an opportunity, I think that support is there. There's never more resources, but there's also never more supports. But unfortunately, they're all fragmented, and they haven't been kind of organized and promoted in a way that people with the ideas can get the best from them. There's too much of a struggle to find out what's available for your particular project, like, you know what I mean? And I just think that with the advent of SERI and with the social enterprise unit in the Department of Rural and Community Development, I think that within the next 12 months, I think there'll be a huge improvement in that area. And I certainly think that there's every opportunity. In the European Union, I think 6% of the economy is in social enterprise. In Ireland, I think it's 2% of the economy is in social enterprise. So even to get up to the average in Europe, there's an enormous potential there and there's no reason why we can't do that. No reason whatsoever. Actually, Ireland is more suited to social enterprise than a lot of other countries throughout the European Union. It's traditionally an island of communities. And the structure is kind of there already, the natural structure for collaboration and for investigation and for research and all that. It's all there, and it's all to play for.
Thank you very much for that, Senan. It's just been incredible just to listen to all the inspirational and influential comments and remarks that we've had today from our guest speakers. So I can't thank you enough for taking time out and for joining us. And if you don't mind, on behalf of Carol and I, so I'm just going to wind down, is just to thank our panelists, to thank all of our colleagues who've contributed to this, to our project working group and to our SuNSE partners. It's just very valuable insights that we have, and discussion needs to continue obviously over the next period, and it'll be interesting to see what the next years present for social enterprises across the country. So just to say that if there's anybody out there who's in a situation of where they're looking to start, or they're currently in a position with a social enterprise, to feel free to contact us if you have any questions. And we really want to hear from social enterprises, particularly in the southern half of the country. And just a reminder, that we offer a range of free of charge services. So if you or somebody else is looking for that initial support and advice, please feel free to get in contact with us. So and just to say, look, thank you very much, and hope everybody has the rest of a very good day. And we look forward to hearing how the world and the space of social enterprises grows and develops over the foreseeable future.
I'd just like to say thank you very much to everybody for attending, and particularly our speakers, Tammy, Senan and John, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.